Christians attending from teleconference from Holland, Michigan.
And Hemingway.
Tim Hemingway attending via teleconference from Holland, Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. You have a quorum, and we will just note when and if we have other members that join in on the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. So now my first item, approving the minutes from the last meeting. So do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So move.
Seconded.
Support from PJ. So moved by Tim, supported by PJ. Any discussion on the minutes?
No.
All right, not hearing any, then we'll call the question. So all those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, minutes pass. So we'll move on to the second item, which is our public comment. So do we have anybody that would like to make public comment? Peter Bolgard, I see your hands up there. So why don't we start with you, Peter?
Thank you. It's Peter Bolgart, virtually in Zeeland, Michigan. I just wanted to take just a moment to reflect on some conversation in the past meeting in which there was some thought about how much leeway the strategic development team may have in considering the overall goal for the community energy plan. And I'm of the opinion from my reading of the plan that there's considerable leeway available. So I tried to put some of those thoughts down on paper, and they're attached to the e-comment section of your agenda. And so I just wanted to call that out and ask you to take a look at that and consider those thoughts. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter, appreciate it. Do we have any other public comment? Shanley, you want to go next? You're in order on my screen here, so.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
My name is Shanley Poole. I live at 932 Chelsea Court in Holland, Michigan. And once again, just want to thank you all for the work that you do. Similar to Peter, I also wanted to bring up something that I noticed at the previous strategic development team meeting, and that was a comment or question rather that was brought up by the team's own Nikki Arnshorst. The question that she brought up was one of mission versus strategy, specifically if SDT members were allowed to adjust the mission. And I was really grateful that she brought this up. But in the meeting, the response received implied to me that the CEP mission was already set in place and was not to be adjusted by the SDT. And I would like to challenge this idea. From what I have seen, your team consists of a committee of experts that were chosen specifically for their experience and wisdom. And I think it would be short-sighted to not allow you all to develop that mission further. If this team is only assembled to dictate strategy under the parameters of a preset mission, it seems only so much can be done. This is a time in which a lot of citizens are stepping forward to tell you what they hope will surface in this energy plan. And this is a time in which citizens are saying there is a lot of work to be done. Last week, Nikki aptly pointed out that the majority of us offering public comment have expressed our concerns for the climate. The priority to protect our environment is not explicitly expressed in the mission's current statement, which reads to enhance the attractiveness of the city to investors, businesses, and residents through the availability of cost-effective, reliable, and granted clean energy supply. Ann Salyers last week said that the mission wasn't tweaked by BPW because it was, quote, out of scope, quote, out of scope, end quote, with the rest of their project, which I find totally understandable, but I want to make sure that this mission isn't continually swept under the rug, always referenced as out of someone's scope. When it comes to the strategic development team, I believe it falls directly under your scope, and it must be examined with the utmost scrutiny. Mission dictates strategy, And the strategies that you implement are ones that will care for Hollanders for generations to come if done correctly. So I want to thank you once again for the work that you do, and I trust that the mission of the CEP will be in great hands if passed along to your team. And I hope that you are given the privilege to reshape that mission as necessary to meet our citizens' needs. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Shanley. Any other public comments? Laura, you're next on my list.
Okay, Laura Judge, virtually here, Holland. Thank you for letting me comment and for your hard work on this team. Leading world economist Nicholas Stern of the London School of Economics and the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment tells us we must be at 2 metric tons CO2 emissions per capita by 2050 as a world average to have any hope of achieving a warming cap of 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit worldwide. Holland's current goal of 10 metric tons per capita by 2050 falls well shy of this scientific reality and responsibility. Because Mayor Box has indicated that council should not consider revising their emissions goals until the SDT produces their report, it does fall upon your shoulders to recommend updated decarbonization and greenhouse gas emissions targets to council. Current science and the majority of Holland citizens implore you to advocate for a revised goal of 10 metric tons per capita by 2030. This should include exiting your Campbell 3 coal contract by 2030. Here are 6 more takeaways I'll just throw out. Don't be isolationists, be a statewide and West Michigan leader in climate action. Leverage the expertise and reputation that BPW General Manager Dave Koster is known for. Take a hard look at your internal biases. Don't underestimate your influence as community leaders or the importance of being a trusted messenger to the public. Foster a climate of environmental ethics in the community across residents, business, and tourists. The stakes for which you are involved are immense. We are in the race for our children's lives, for your children's lives. And lastly, Van Raalte Farm would be a great spot to build a community solar farm and a good way to earn some renewable energy credits. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Hannah, you are next.
My public comment is about electric vehicles. So I live and work in Holland, and I love the quality of life here. Part of our wonderful West Michigan lifestyle comes at the courtesy of the many suppliers based here who service our state's automotive industry. These suppliers know that they must do more than just keep pace with their customers. They have to think ahead to anticipate their future needs. The smartest suppliers are already preparing for a bigger push in electric vehicles. Both GM and Ford have talked about phasing out gasoline-powered vehicles in less than 20 years, and other automotive companies are pledging to spend billions on EVs in the coming years. In MI Biz, an automotive industry analyst says West Michigan suppliers are already, quote, well down the road to making EV-specific components like battery trays and separators. He says that any suppliers not actively preparing for electrification had definitely better get on it because, quote, the horse is out of the gate, it's coming. This made me think of the horse and buggy days when I read it because that's what smart people were saying in the early 1900s about gasoline-powered buggies. New technology, changing consumer tastes, and auto industry policy and regulatory changes are all driving this move to electric power. Many of our locally based auto industry suppliers get it. They know the demand for EV components will bring changes as new suppliers enter the market while some others merge, are acquired, or quit the business altogether. The suppliers that are financially healthy and quick to adapt will survive and thrive in the coming EV age. To quote our country's new energy secretary and former Michigan governor, Jennifer Granholm, we can buy electric car batteries from Asia, or we can make them in America. On the other hand, many parts of the automotive industry won't need to adapt their product. Gentex, based in Zealand and an employer of many Holland people, specializes in glass, mirrors, and digital vision. They have already embraced the future of the industry, saying, quote, "As vehicle electrification and autonomous driving trends progress, our core technologies are converging to yield products that provide unprecedented advances." I'm optimistic that our area will remain an important base for regional auto industry suppliers and that the industry's move to EVs will be taken in stride here. I also think the opportunities for new suppliers and their need for qualified workers will bring a major boost to our area's economy. We can help by voting for EVs with our wallets and moving to cleaner, renewable energy. That's why I support the Holland Climate Collaborative's call for cutting every resident's greenhouse gas emissions by 50% every 10 years. I believe we can do this and support our local suppliers transitioning to EV components in the process. The horse is out of the gate. It's time to jump in or get left behind. Thank you.
You're on mute, Travis.
Thanks, Hannah. Is there any other public comment? Sorry.
Hi, I have one.
All right, Killen, go ahead.
My name is Killian Roach. I am a current resident of Grand Rapids in the 49505 zip code area. I'm a former resident of Ottawa County, both grew up in Allendale and grew up in Holland and went to college in Allendale, creating lifelong ties to the area. My family still lives in Holland, and I am working on an upcoming environmental action group to do a lot of work in the area as well. Having the opportunity to live widely among the West Michigan area has shown me how different communities need different kinds of advances. Moving from the Lakeshore to Grand Rapids has shown me the possibilities for sustainable transportation development, from accessible and more expansive bus systems to walkable and bikeable cities, as well as bike and ride fares. Expanding the bus system operation capacity has the potential to benefit both the climate and the community. According to the American Public Transportation Association, public transportation reduces human dependence on oil, saving about 900,000 tanks of gas every single day, and producing only about half of the carbon dioxide of private transportation. The APTA also estimates that public transportation users can save over $9,900 annually, savings that may be more important as ever now that society is facing unprecedented pandemics, climate catastrophes, and unavailable salaries. Of course, in order for citizens to use transportation, they need assurance that it'll be reliable and accessible. A strong transportation system doesn't just reduce carbon emissions, it provides job security for those that rely on public transportation and provides businesses with a more secure workforce. But transportation isn't all about business. It provides quality of life and leisure. This speaks to my family personally. My younger sister, she's only 8 years old, is on the autism spectrum, and we're unsure what her capabilities will be in the future as she begins to display more advanced forms of functioning. Safe, well-developed public transportation systems such as busing, ride shares, and more sustainable infrastructure could take pressures off of families like mine, not only long-term transportation needs of individuals that may not be able to drive, but moves towards ensuring their future on this planet. This transportation would have to cater not only to job opportunities, but other important communal needs such as therapy and education centers, as well as natural spaces. Currently, the MAX bus transportation is limited to the city centers of Holland and reduces access to green space. Access to green space is an ever-increasing environmental issue with reduced access among low-income neighborhoods and vulnerable communities. As you continue to develop a plan for transportation, I encourage you to think about what green spaces will be made available to the public in these routes. Green space is vital to the health of all living things, providing direct mental, physical, and sociological benefits. Holland is a place that has fostered community for decades. Developing a strong system of public transportation is just one more way to make Holland more accessible to all and ensure a sustainable future for generations to come. Thank you again for all of the work that you do, and I am hoping to see a great change.
Great, thank you. Is there any other public comment? I think that's everybody. The last thing we'll do then, and then I see Brian came on, but Brian, I'll do a little bit more for you here. We did receive several e-comments, a couple links to them on the agenda. I would like us to accept those formally. So do I have a motion to accept the public comments that were submitted electronically?
So move.
Second.
Who seconded that? Jeff? Jeff has a second. Is there any discussion on any of those comments?
I appreciate getting so many since last time we didn't get any, I think.
No,
So-
making up for lost time.
Making up for lost time. And I, a couple of them, some of them are say the similar, encouraging us, and others, like the one right up there now, has some recommendations. So it's worthwhile reading.
Great. Any other comments on those? All right. So having got the motion by Tim, seconded by Jeff, let's go ahead and take a vote. So all those agree to accept public comment, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Anybody abstain? Anybody vote no? All right, we passed those. So now we're on to the item 4, which is education items, and our illustrious president joined us. So Brian, would you like to take over?
You're doing great, Trav.
Yeah.
Not your first rodeo. Yeah, sorry for my tardiness, everyone. We can just keep rolling though. I know we got a full agenda today. So last time we talked about transportation. It was a good discussion. There was a lot there, and I'm curious if people had new thoughts or comments or questions regarding that topic last week, 2 weeks ago, excuse me.
But it was a good discussion. I don't want to start out every discussion, so someone else start next time.
I can start, Nikki. So I agree. I think there's a lot in transportation. I mean, we just heard some small snippets in the public comment section. I think there's a lot there to chew on. I know one of the things, and maybe Dave, you can help answer this question. One of the things that we've kind of touched on here and there over the last, I don't know how many meetings, is this Ford mobility proposal. That wasn't really talked about at all last meeting. Can we discuss, like, what exactly would that look like? I know there's been some discussion. There's potentially some money in the budget to look at something like that in a little bit more detail. Can you give me a little bit better info on exactly what that is and would look like, and what they're thinking about?
Yeah, so again, I think COVID obviously has thrown us a little bit of a curveball here, but the idea is a pretty robust stakeholder community engagement process to develop a comprehensive mobility strategy for the community. And that strategy would obviously address some things that are supportive of reducing our carbon footprint, because we'd be looking at reducing vehicle miles traveled. We'd be looking at encouraging mass transit. We've been encouraging looking at last mile solutions, to support the transit. A lot of those things would be elements there. It would also look at autonomous preparation from an infrastructure standpoint. It would look at, transition in terms of electric vehicles and charging and things like that. So there would be elements that are supportive of the community energy plan and carbon reduction. It would also be important to infrastructure development, as well as it would be important to economic developments. It's part of the issue that's been cited, I think, among Lakeshore Advantage and other manufacturers is being able to, encourage other opportunities for being able to get workers, to and from, locations of business. And so I think there's a lot of different groups that are going to have a role to play in a process like that. And there's a lot of outcomes that go beyond just the energy consumption and carbon footprint piece of that, although it's a very important part. So Ford Mobility put together a proposal that's a $75,000 effort. And there are multiple stages to that. I think it's like four main stages to that effort. And a lot of it involves pretty significant public engagement. And so I think it's one of these things where probably difficult for the SDT themselves to tee it up, but certainly the SDT could make a recommendation looking at the totality of the proposal and encourage the city to engage in a process that would invite other stakeholders into it, where there are other interests and then possibly other contributors as well to that effort, given the fact that it's addressing things beyond just the climate issues and the energy issues. So that proposal is in the resources document. I touched on it very briefly in terms of one slide last time. But if we want to pull it up and take a look at anything more detail, I can open it up under the resources document, Jeff, if you.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through and read it. I guess one of the questions, and you kind of answered that, like, this is something that we would not have the ability to say, yes, let's do this. We would have the ability to say, we think we should do this, or we think we should engage with a stakeholder like this.
Well, I think the issue is more timing anything. I think this group could probably, we could start acting on it before we're done with this. But I think the bigger issue is looking at, when we get kind of clear of the ability to have meaningful stakeholder engagement beyond what we're doing here through the Zoom calls and everything like that, that there may be an interest in looking at this being a little bit of a if there is a post-COVID, process in the near future, that would be something that would be done. There's some money that's been set aside for consultancy support. And certainly it was one of the things that we looked at as to whether or not and to what extent, some of that money could be put forward towards this endeavor. And I think we're interested in the group's perspective on that. But I do think that, and Keith and I both believe that there are other groups, that this is also important to, that there are other things beyond just the energy issues here. And so it's not just this group, but certainly this group could make a strong recommendation that because of the issues that support the energy plan and progress, that it would make sense to do that. We want to point out again, though, that, I'm not trying to diminish it, and there are a lot of important aspects to it. But if you look at the pie, the total amount of greenhouse gas per capita here in the transportation sector is a relatively small piece of that. I think it's like 2.5 metric tons per capita, when we look at that piece of it. So it's just a matter of putting it in perspective. But again, that is up to this group to decide as far as prioritization and emphasis, what they want to do with that. Keith, is there anything that you would want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think you covered it really well. So I won't. The only thing that I'll maybe even further emphasize that I think both Dave and I feel is that, a recommendation to city council is really what you're doing on all of these things, right? But I think the transportation, and particularly this potentially is a proposal in getting other stakeholders at the process. A lot of the other things that we've been talking about, Jeff, I think are in the realm of the city and or the BPW are the lead or really are the only ones that impact potential solutions. And when it comes to transportation, that is not the same case.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, some of the industrial stuff we've been we've been having some of the same discussions. There's the BPW has more of a role to play there, and it's maybe less stakeholders than transportation. But I mean, I know a lot of the discussion that we had last time was exactly this. And I think, I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I think just to note, so I know transportation is, I don't remember exactly the percent, 12, 13% here in Holland. It is like 25% of greenhouse gas emissions nationally. So it is a larger, like we're a weird community because of all the industrial presence, but it's a bigger component of the whole picture nationally and globally than maybe what the 12% looks like.
And we agreed it's very visible too. It's a visible activity that may warrant more attention.
So Dave and Keith, maybe you guys can help me. I agree with what Jeff, and I agree with you, Nikki, too. I mean, everybody, I think we're all kind of saying the same things to a degree, but is there two or three questions that go with this? Are there other organizations or other parts of the community that could be called in to help with something like this? So, I mean, I think of MAC, I think of Max Transportation, I think the City of Holland, BPW, like there's not just one player that should probably be part of this, because it really crosses multi-jurisdictional boundaries if we're going to start talking about transportation and having a truly unified system approach to this, which doing it piecemeal by one jurisdiction seems like a kind of a waste and not a real well thought out process. So are there others that have been brought into this? So that's my one question, or should be. And my second question is, so it's the Ford mobility study. Is there a Honda mobility study or a GMC mobility study? Like, is there some other group, or is this the group? And just wondering if there's other people we should get proposals from.
Yeah, I mean, there are other people to provide proposals for mobility strategy development. I mean, I think that is an option for the city to pursue if there's an interest there. And I think that's been a discussion too that we've had a little bit with some of our transportation people in the city, like Brian White, for example, having some discussion there. But Ford Mobility is a division of Ford. I don't know that all the automotive manufacturers have their own division. This group was formed to help communities with mobility solutions, including strategy development as being one of those. But they actually have businesses, to provide last mile type of services, and actual rental of equipment, to provide that last mile. I mean, there are different divisions within the Ford Mobility suite of offerings, and strategy development and consulting are just one of those things that are there. So, I mean, that's why there's this Ford Mobility. And it also was a logical exploration based upon leveraging the relationship that we had between the individual who's our community representative on the steering committee, who's Jim Stelter, and then the former Ford CEO, who's Jim Hackett, and Jim knew each other on a personal level and business level while at Steelcase together. And so there was that relationship there that was sort of leveraged to get us talking about that in the first place. Doesn't mean we can't explore other proposals out there. I mean, it's just one that we have at this point. Now, that the other thing you asked about was other organizations, and some of those that you mentioned already are key. Yeah, the MAC, which represents different governmental jurisdictions throughout this area, and beyond City Holland, obvious, that would be one. MAX, which is handling as a authority the transportation for mass transit. That is one. Probably others that are working on the Grand Rapids Holland corridor, and looking at that would be another group. And then finally, Lakeshore Advantage, which obviously for employee connections is one, but also in terms of, types of things that might come out of this that actually support from a supply standpoint, some of our primary manufacturers, how they might serve into that. I think there would be an interest for Lakeshore Advantage to be involved in that. And I don't know, again, if I'm missing anybody, Keith, there, but feel free to supplement that.
No, those are the four main ones. I probably could create another 4, 5, 6 that either would be involved or should be involved. But again, yeah, the timing of this not aligning with the probable outcome of the SDT work. And the fact that, quite frankly, there's other institutions that are in more of a driver's seat as it relates to the transportation discussion than is the city or certainly the BPW, I think is why you're viewing kind of the discussions or the recommendations from Dave and I that you're hearing.
So may I ask, this Ford mobility proposal never went through? They never.
It's just a proposal on the table.
Okay.
And what I would say is, no, so it's not been executed or approved by anyone. And when you potentially look at a group of a new partnership, should that emerge, then you would, that partnership would need to decide, do they like this proposal or would they want to look at other proposals at the same time?
I have
I
another
think the overall
follow-up
approach is wise.
When I first came on council, there was something coming through, was money authorized somehow with Mark Vanderplug in a group, a smaller amount of money, Bev Communications, or there's something for a mobility kind of thing, transportation exploration, not?
I'm not familiar with that, Nikki. I'm
That
sorry.
might have been a marketing support. Bev Snyder helps us
Bev
with
Snyder.
some of our marketing plans.
Yeah, that was
for-
community education, and we are proceeding with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
Just
that wasn't
different.
transportation.
okay. Good, thank you.
PJ, did you have something? I see you leaning in.
Thank you. Yes. I guess I just very interesting, especially the discussions of all the potential guidance sources that I'm hearing here. Where I would sit conclusively is I would envision that when this group submits their strategy priorities to the council, that transportation is going to be a big one, and that we will be shaping as a recommendation very specific encouragement of the electrification of vehicles and 3 to 5 year goals that would accompany that. And I think that based on earlier discussions of electricity portfolio and all these other things, knowing that electricity generation is such a substantial amount of the CO2 challenge that we face, we can bracket that. We can say, look, we can come up with solutions to that, but that should not inhibit us from suggesting a pretty specific and bold strategy encouragement for electric vehicles. We've heard that now from a number of our community members, including a couple of people on this call today. So I think we could probably gain a lot of energy in this direction.
Yeah, thanks, PJ. Other comments?
I guess my thought, kind of based on what PJ said. So I totally agree. I think that's, I think we have to do exactly what you said, PJ, in like tandem with some of these other groups to make it as effective as possible. And I think that's where, maybe something like the Ford Mobility Project, I think that makes some sense for that to be one prong of kind of this broader conversation. Because I think, if our recommendation is increase EV adoption, but it doesn't have connection to some of these broader stakeholders, it doesn't have the same legs. So I think that's where this one, we have less of a lever maybe than some of the, or a weaker lever than maybe some of the other possible places that we could look at. But I absolutely agree.
I agree. And I think the problem here is I'm all for it, but if there isn't a system-wide approach to it, it's going to be really difficult to be successful with it. So
Yeah. And I think that this will get fleshed out in the specifics of how we write the recommendation. But my sense is this is going to be like a very enthusiastic thumbs up from us, but we have very little impact on a lot of it relative to needing all these other people and the timelines of all the other groups. And so versus some of the other stuff where there's like enthusiasm and specific things that we can have more control over. And so I think these are the things that are just outside of our control. Is we have no idea when Lakeshore Advantage and Max and Mac are getting together and talking about this. All we can really do is say, we really hope that they do that.
And that we will
Is that
support.
fair, Dave?
Yeah, I think what you could do, I mean, there's a couple things. One, I think in terms of a recommendation back to city council, you could encourage the formation of a broader group to look at mobility strategy, and that group would consider proposals that would address as priorities not only the economic development impacts and the infrastructure impacts, but also the climate and energy impacts of those strategies. And that would be something then that, this group wouldn't necessarily take on, but it would encourage that at the next level, the city council would instruct Keith and me to try to pull this group together to actually act on the mobility. And then you could go on to actually have more specific things within our wheelhouse, which are associated with the additional EV adoption, in terms of strategies in the short term. So you could still have a very direct recommendation, but it would be a recommendation to engage this broader group on the broader mobility question.
Does that sound representative, Jeff and PJ, of sort of what you guys are leaning into?
I guess a lot of thoughts come to mind here. Dave and Keith, if I could ask one specific city question, would the city of Holland ever entertain positioning ourselves to be a beta site of some sort? Phoenix, Arizona, driverless cars, countless other communities who help, they put themselves as a beta site. If you look at some of the enabling technologies that are emerging right now to take e-vehicles to scale, charging station ubiquity. I'm almost talking about some things that I don't completely understand, but these are things that I'm seeing that other communities that are no less, or no greater than Holland are putting themselves out to do. Would we be in position to recommend that to our city council?
So part of PJ there, what I would say is sometimes that's a chicken and an egg type thing. Like, do you go searching for that type of thing and say, hey, we're open to this, and you're not exactly sure all the details that's surrounding that? Or sometimes do you get searched out by a group or a company that says, hey, we would like to use you on that scale? I will say that there have been discussions, primarily because we've had some interactions with Ford about, hey, potentially you're the type of community that could, and then insert X, Y, and Z there. But there's a lot of unknowns and implications that go along with that also. So I certainly wouldn't want to answer that because there's just too many unknowns.
Well, I think Keith's exactly right. Doing this forward mobility work, let's forget about if it's forward mobility, but somebody that has connections to ultimately solutions that go in is an important aspect. I mean, if you have a strategy that's put together and then there's solutions, Holland could then be a test site for those solutions, but they generally come on the tail end of that exploration and decision of strategy and prioritization around that through some evaluation of whether or not Holland appears to be a good fit for that. So I think, let that process happen. And I think if it does, it sets us up in a good way. I was going to make some sort of quip and I can't now, but I think Holland, driving around Holland, it seems like we have driverless cars sometimes anyway at this point, but I was sorry. I was going to.
But we get that word out there of interest in e-vehicles, et cetera. And it's part of the whole fabric of recommendations. It is chicken and eggish. It's important. We set our recommendations. We can start or encourage conversations, and it will happen.
You know, the other, oh, sorry, Nikki.
Uh,
The other thing that I would just continue to remind, and we're in the brainstorm phase right now, right? And brainstorming, I participate in and I love. I'm gonna parallel this with the Waterfront Holland process where we brainstormed things and there were drawings that were put out that were like, wouldn't it be great if we could do this or we could do that, which generates a lot of good ideas and a lot of excitement sometimes. But there's also sometimes the realization that there has to be some prioritization also, where when you take a look at the list of things that we're doing, we probably can't be world class. We just don't have the capacity to kind of be world class and be like the best in show in everything.
Yeah, Keith, though, even before that, I mean, we don't even need to decide one way or the other on this. I think all of this just goes back to, even if we wanted to try and like court Uber,
doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Google or somebody to do a pilot with us, we need the max and the max. I mean, frankly, we're very small. And so you're going to need other players at the table to even do any of that courting. I mean, there's just, which is again, back to like, and we'll map all this out when we write the recommendation. I think we're all saying there's cool stuff going on here and we want to lift it up and support it. And the main part of the recommendation is get all these other groups that need to be at the table at a special table, at a committee to like work this thing out. I mean,
and we can convene that, right, Brian? But at some point we can convene and then after that, we lose control.
That's not our job. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the most impact we can have is at the end of our thing, council goes to Lakeshore Advantage, goes to Max, goes to MAC and says, get together and strategically work this out. Like that would be a win from our perspective, is if we could inspire council to lean on those groups to get together, to be proactive and create the chicken or the egg, whichever one you want it to be. That to me would be success, unless people think it should be more than that or different than that.
No, Brian, that is so well said. And again, when I think of what we're doing, I close my eyes and I envision Mayor Box or any one of our city council members or any one of these community members asking me, okay, what is the priority? What are the 3 to 5 year goals? And how are you going to, what suggestions are you going to have? And I think that in this case, transportation, clearly an important, area, e-vehicles and the electrification of our transportation modes, very important priority. And I think from the guidance of these other sources that were cited earlier, it will not be hard to come up with, a set of 3 to 5 year goals. And then we need a couple of cool suggestions. We need a couple of things that, that we can say, well, hey, here's how we might be able to do this. And again, our town is incredibly resourceful. We have been in the past. And, I think we can go with this.
Good. Yeah.
And nobody mentioned also one of the other players that should be at the table are those that are providing transportation for the school systems. Because we've got a lot of big diesel or fossil fuel powered vehicles that are out there that should be at the table along with the others that are providing that type of transportation. I'm going to play absolutely transportation has got to be an integral part of the plan, but I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. And in taking a look at our charts relative to the carbon footprint of transportation, which is very visual, as Nikki pointed out, you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. The silent one that is there is our single largest contributor to our carbon footprint, which is in the industrial sector. And I'm hoping that we'll have discussions on things that are tangible that can be done in conjunction with private industry, that where we can do the reduction of that. Oh, sorry, Tim forgot to turn off his phone.
Take it. That'll be fun.
No. There we go. Got that. Sorry about. I apologize for that. But things that are realistic, meaningful, etc. Because we're an unusual community in the level of industrial activities that occur in our community, and therefore it is a single largest generation of carbon in our community. And are there things that we should be reviewing and or proposing or directional strategic direction relative to trying to wrestle that to the ground to improve what's happening in our community? Because if you could do a significant reduction in the industrial sector, that will have the single largest impact on the community. So, I just don't want to lose sight of that, because the only thing that I am cognizant of at this point are things relative to energy waste reduction in the industrial sector. Are there other opportunities, and there should be, and if so, how do we approach that as a team?
Yeah.
Well, and that's going to be the topic for discussion on the 29th. We'll actually have a speaker in who's currently with Steelcase, and she'll be presenting on how industry is looking at these issues right now and what resonates with them in terms of programs and policies and things like that. But there's also been other exploration that we've had with different groups in the past on the commercial and institutional buildings. So we'll share that on the 29th as well. So
having a meeting on the 29th?
Yeah, meeting on the 29th. Yep.
Good.
Not meeting on the 5th of April.
No meeting. Okay.
So we're meeting on the 29th, but not the 5th of April.
Excellent.
So let's just round out the transportation lever really quick here. Is there, with the understanding that we're gonna definitely have a recommendation of some kind to the council tied to transportation, and loosely it will be with lots of enthusiasm suggesting a broader group of stakeholders needs to get together intentionally to dig in on this. Is there anything, again, we can, in future months come back and add more, but for the moment, is there anything else that is wildly missing or unaddressed as it relates to transportation before we move into residential energy?
Brian, I'm not seeing anything from your group, but I will add that as far as one thing we're working on right now, I don't know if it'll be completed entirely by the time that the group is done with recommendations, but we're working on looking at incentivizing fast charging as well, which is something we have the level 2 charger incentives at the home and at the business, but we're looking at coming up with a incentive for fast charger at this point for more of corridor charging. So we are looking at that as something that we would want to work on to promote electrification of vehicles as well, to reduce some of the range anxiety issues.
That's probably
in the city.
We're working on it. It would be on our service territory. Yeah. So it'd be, in our service territory.
I mean, I know there are already some incentives right now for charging infrastructure, and that's really the on the ground aspect that I feel like the city has control over, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure some of that in our 3 to 5 year recommendations, I guess I'd like to see some of that come up for discussion as to what the strategy is for kind of the on the ground charging infrastructure. Because I think that plays a big role in like accessibility of charging stations and stuff, plays a big role for consumers.
It's like advertising too. You see it, so maybe my next car, I should think about that because it's possible. That's what goes through people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, range anxiety, at least was, and I know it's improving, but that was a barrier to adoption, was range anxiety.
Yeah.
Well, as was mentioned in a previous meeting, and I forgot what the percentage of our local GDP is related to tourism. If we are looked upon favorably and welcomingly of having the ability of people come here, and while they're here, there are charging stations available, that's just going to, I think, encourage that sector of the economy, as opposed to, as Dave just pointed out, range anxiety. Gee, if I go to Holland, how the heck do I charge my car? So that needs to be looked into as part of the overall strategy.
And we'll keep our reputation as a progressive place.
Exactly.
And I'll just say, as I look at Travis and a Zoom screen, there's always things happening in those arenas that are kind of in process. So while Dave at one point did describe kind of the overall strategy that I agree with, that switched, that it's like, okay, you might facilitate the location of some of these chargers in certain instances, and then they're at cost when you do those, and that we have incentives there, and that there probably makes sense some places for targeted fast charger stations. Mm-hmm. For your own community, primarily people are going to be charging, their vehicles in their locations. Mm-hmm. But there is a sliver of a market where it makes sense really to support other things that we're about, Tim, tourism, mm-hmm. and the like. Yep. But I'll just let you know that, there's multiple things kind of in play and possibilities there where I don't think that really, that could be one of those easy things that PJ mentioned, where it's like there's some specific things that we could plug in there that are reasonably accomplished.
Yep. Good.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Certainly we'll be circling back on transportation and specifics, just like all of the major levers down the road. Dave and Ann, I believe you guys have a robust for us. We're moving into the built environment, which, to Tim's point earlier, if you count residential, commercial, and industrial all as one, it's the largest part of our pie. We're going to learn about a subset today on residential, which is got some of the best stories I know from the last 10 years. And I know there's a lot to talk through, so I'll be quiet and hand it over to you, Dave.
Well, I'm going to hand it pretty quickly over to Ann, just to say that I really appreciate, over the last several years, Ann has done amazing work in this segment of our greenhouse gas reduction. Really, BPW has had a very successful residential energy waste reduction program. She'll talk about some of the results of that, but if you look at the graph of our carbon reduction, you can see that electric usage actually went down in our residential group about 9% over the last 10 years. And that is a testament to her work and her team's work to actually get the measures put into the residential units to allow for that to happen. And we've done that probably the most cost effectively among all the utilities in the state of Michigan, because we onboarded the staff to do it as opposed to contracting it, which helped us actually get closer to our customers and manage that more successfully. So that's something that Ann does in addition to helping the steering committee work on all things related to community energy plan, and really appreciate that she put together this presentation for you this afternoon, which I think is pretty comprehensive and takes us through all the elements of residential building consumption. So Ann, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can walk us through.
Okay, good afternoon. It's good to see everyone again. And can you see my screen all right?
We see the ones with the slides on the side, Ann. I don't know if you have the ability to switch to the other one.
Do that.
There you go. You got it.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, robust means there's a lot of content here. There's a lot that's been going on in the last 10 years in the residential building sector. And so strap on your seatbelts. I'm going to try to fly through this as quickly as possible so that we get through it. And why don't we start with some of the macro information? And that is that buildings account for 76% of electricity use in the US, 40% of all energy use associated with greenhouse gas emissions. So it's essential to reduce energy consumption in buildings in order to meet national and environmental challenges and reduce costs to building owners. So this is information that is from the Energy Information Administration, or EIA, to which BPW reports annually. And the University of Michigan has some great fact sheets, and I pulled some snippets out of one that they've done on the residential buildings, and we can add this to the resource documents. But some of the trends that have been impacting residential energy use is that home sizes have been increasing. They've increased 67% for a single family home since 1970. And at the same time, there's been a decrease in the number of occupants on average. So this bar chart shows how the number of single person homes has increased to where it's almost, between a quarter and a third of all homes are just one occupant. And then in Michigan, Michigan households use 123 million BTUs of energy per home, which is more than the US average. And the high consumption combined with low costs for heating fuels compared to other states brings us in at spending 6% more for energy than the US average. It would be higher than that if gas prices weren't so low. So, where does our energy go? Here's the US average breakdown according to Energy Star. And you'll see that 46% of your energy consumption goes to heating and cooling, illustrating how important it is that we have well-sealed and insulated homes, in addition to high efficiency furnace and air conditioner. And water heating's another 14%. Appliances, 13, lighting, 12, and other things plus electronics makes up the last 15%. So what about in Holland? This is data from our 2018 carbon footprint, and 2010 was our baseline. And if you read the middle line, residential, this is what Dave was alluding to. In 2010, it was 19% of our footprint, and we've been successful in getting that down to 16%. And that's been primarily through SEMCOs and our energy waste reduction programs. But we also had the Georgetown University Energy Prize competition going on from 2014 to 2016. And that had a big impact on educating people and getting the word out and giving people a sense of urgency on making reductions. And I also would say the work of the residential task force that was led by Peter Boogart, hi Peter, see you're here today, and progress on the home energy retrofit program is part of it. So in terms of amount, typical residential energy use in our area is about 70% natural gas and 30% is electricity. That's in the amount that we use. But when you're looking at greenhouse gas emissions, there's been a significant shift in the portion from electricity than that of natural gas. So in the 2018 calculation, it doesn't necessarily show here, but residential emissions from natural gas now exceed emissions from electricity. So roughly 47 percent electricity, 53% coming from natural gas. So my takeaway from that is that we should focus on helping residents use less natural gas, because we can green how electricity is produced faster and more fully than being able to how natural gas is produced. So when it comes to residential conservation, or reducing carbon footprint, there are a number of strategies that can be employed. And if you think about, okay, what can we do that's around natural gas in this regard? With conservation, which in the community energy plan is the first in the loading order. If you don't need it, don't use it. Best way to get to that is through education. Energy efficiency, we can incentivize the purchase of more energy efficient equipment. And, we do through the energy waste reduction program, so does SEMCO. Electrification is another strategy where we incentivize people purchasing or switching fuels. Instead of using internal combustion engine, switch to electric vehicles. Renewables is also another strategy. We can promote or incentivize the electric renewable energy rate. Maybe you saw the Living Sustainably column in the paper yesterday that talked about that as an option for people for their homes. And we can also incentivize rooftop solar, that is a renewable resource. Another strategy on how to get people off of using natural gas to help reduce the carbon footprint is through policy. There are some communities that are not permitting natural gas hookups with new construction, for example, for safety, health, and environmental reasons. So keep those in mind as we go along. And, what I'd like to have you look at now or think about is building science. And that's the understanding of how our houses work. We need to look at our house as a system and use a whole house approach or whole systematic approach. So by that, our houses are like our bodies. They're made up of all these different systems that all work together and function as a whole. And like going to the doctor for an annual checkup or for an ailment, the doctor first uses questions and other diagnostic tools to evaluate how everything is working. And that's why the comprehensive energy audit by a trained technician is the all-important first step. So with lots of things start here in understanding how a house is performing well or how it isn't. So things like the blower door test and a smoke gun for checking for air leaks and thermography are some of the techniques that are used. And so, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, as I mentioned before, is 46% of the energy use. And that really gets at, when you think of the building envelope, it's important that the house is it's air sealed, that there's good insulation, that the furnace is energy efficient, same with the air conditioning. People are using a programmable thermostat. And heat pump technology is another way to help reduce energy use. Water heating, around here, most people use natural gas water heaters in the tank style. Other options are on-demand water heaters or heat pump water heating. Another way to switch from using natural gas. Appliances, are 13% of energy use. And the refrigerator, for example, is an appliance that's running 24/7. And so look for the Energy Star label when purchasing appliances. Lighting, 12%. You know, a lot of people have been switching to LEDs. We give out light bulbs like crazy. And I'll show you a slide later on what our penetration is so far. But they use 90% less energy than incandescent light bulbs, and provide the same lumens with less watts. Again, Energy Star is preferred here. Then there's the whole component of just like the health of your body. You know, what are your lifestyle choices? So as it applies to your home, you know, closing doors if it's a room that you're not using, setting your thermostat to a few lower degrees, you know, putting on that fleeced vest like has become the new work wardrobe for everyone working from home. That extra layer can help rather than turning up the thermostat. So in our work, and also with the home energy retrofit program, we use the energy efficiency pyramid as a way to educate people, because they're oftentimes confused. Gosh, where do I start? Where do I begin? What should I do? And this is a terrific tool using low cost, no cost things, starting with that in-home energy audit, and then what should you do first, second, and third in approaching improving the energy efficiency on your home. And so it starts with the audit, and you'll notice that renewables is at the top of the pyramid. So it's suggesting that you want to do all of these things, preferably in this order, before investing in much more expensive renewables like solar panels on your roof. But you know, so one of the requirements we have with the home energy retrofit program, or prerequisite, is that we want to see a certain level of energy efficiency before we'll finance those solar panels with the on-bill loan program. So what does, so that's a bit about building science. What does the community energy plan say about residential homes? And this slide is taken from Peter Garforth's first presentation of the plan to council back in September of 2011. And when it comes to the efficiency of homes and buildings, the community energy plan, as you read at the bottom of this slide, calls for us to systematically raise efficiency at a rate of, and this is the second bullet there, 2.6% of the building stock per year. It recommends developing using a voluntary energy performance labeling program, which I'll touch on a little bit later. And for single family homes by 2033, it's looking for a 53% efficiency gain with renovations financed by the owner, the city, and BPW. And by 2033, there will be new technologies in place and building practices, and that should allow for another wave of efficiency to get to 66% efficiency. So also recommended are air conditioning and refrigerator exchange programs, you know, because the hydrofluorocarbons in the coolants are especially damaging if not handled properly. So that's one of the reasons we offer a refrigerator and room air conditioner take back program. Same with dehumidifiers. So addressing refrigerants is also the number 2 best thing we can do on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, according to Paul Hawkins' book Drawdown, which lists the 100 best things to do to prevent climate change. And then last time I spoke with you on energy education, which was a recommended enabling mechanism. Also in the community energy plan are these recommended scale projects. So single family homes are scale project number 2 in the plan. And it's saying that 70% of all the single family residential homes in Holland need these deep energy retrofits because they were homes that were built before 1970. And or 85% are pre-1980 and inefficient. So in order to get to the goals of the community energy plan, the rate we need to be doing that is 200 to 250 homes per year. And so the benefits are, avoided cost reduction, avoided generation investment, and really what's key is the benefits to the homeowner are reduced energy costs and risk from future energy prices, but they'll also see improved comfort and health and safety in their homes, and probably their property values increase. What the slide doesn't list is the benefits to the city, which is the increase in the city's tax base and strengthening core neighborhoods. So on this journey, do a quick recap. In 2012, a citizen task force formed, and it did research, discussed ideas, and recommended doing a pilot project, which Schneider Electric was hired as the general contractor to do deep home energy retrofits and see what we'd learn. And ultimately 25 participants completed the projects. Many of you know Phil Meyer. He was one of those 25, which was great to get his perspective on that. And on this slide, you see some of those results. The first graph shows what measures were installed most frequently. So insulation was the number 1 measure that was done, I think, on nearly every home. And the second chart at the top right shows that those who invested $10,000 to $20,000 saw in, if you look at the lower left chart, a 30 to 40% energy efficiency gain from this pilot project. So that's what became the premise for the home energy retrofit program and why we set the program design like we did, which was if a homeowner invested at least $10,000 in a project, that became the threshold of defining what we meant by a deep energy retrofit, that multiple measures would be involved and they'd see at least a 20% energy efficiency gain. So from that, the HER program was launched in 2016 at the end of that year and designed to encourage deep retrofits. The initial offering was a 20% rebate or grant from Holland Energy Fund for projects that cost $10,000 or more. For that, the homeowner received expert guidance in the form of a residential energy advisor. And Peter served in this role the first years of this program. And it turned out to be one of the most successful elements of the program was having someone that the homeowner could go to get guidance that was a third party. They weren't a contractor. And somebody, a coach to help them through the process. So in the program, it's extensive. It covers any item, any measure that's in the Michigan Energy Measures database, which is what we also use for the energy waste reduction program. And it's a database of all the different equipment and things you can do that have bona fide energy savings for them. The program also was set up where we had to have a process for qualifying contractors who participate as the general contractor. A home energy assessment is a requirement of the program and included, and it helps to increase lower utility bills and increase home comfort. And the results to date is that 275 homes have been improved. And you can see the breakdown there. As far as 9 of them, we were able to apply community block grant dollars for some of the low-income homes. And in addition to the 210 that received the rebate, another 56 have done the retrofits just without the grant. The investment that's been made to date is over $4 million. It's quite an economic stimulus program. And so, roughly, if you subtract out the CDBG money, what homeowners have invested, and the reason I say about 87% is that the 20% grant was an introductory rate, then we moved to a 10% rebate, and then most recently last fall, because of COVID, we bumped that back up to 20%, and it'll stay 20% till the end of the fiscal year. And so that, for the cities or the communities, $500,000 investment, we've seen almost $4 million investment, by the community into this. We did use the home energy score program as kind of a building labeling program, and that's on a scale of 1 to 10. On average, homes would test in at a 4 and then test out at a 7. And so the air leakage reduction is 33%. And then other community partners have been involved along the way, Home Corps being one, and then Lakeshore Habitat. It stayed pretty steady that between 50 to 55% of the home energy retrofit projects, the homeowners use the on-bill loan program to finance the project. So, we had the results. 275 homes have been improved, and that's over a period of 4 years. We're now into the 5th year. Well, we need to be doing 275 homes every year, not every 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's barriers. Why aren't we getting to scale? How do we get to scale? I suggest that part of the issue is that energy efficiency is something that's out of sight, out of mind. It's not necessarily sexy, it's expensive. There are competing priorities. Interestingly, up until COVID, people would much prefer to spend their money on a nice vacation or something like that. Well, we saw a doubling, and I think because of COVID, of the number of rebate applications for residential homes last year compared to the year before. Because people haven't been able to go on trips and they're staying home and they're seeing their energy bills go up. So paying some attention to that. And maybe the stimulus checks helped some of those projects too. I think a lot of people are unaware of the value of investing in energy efficiency, or they may not really feel confident in what to do or where to start. And then again, the expense, the payback, some of these things, it's a long payback. I guess I repeated several points here, but also just the inconvenience of doing a project and having your house torn up or people coming in to do work. So that's where on-bill financing comes into play. You know, one of the main barriers to home energy efficiency upgrades is the financing. So while the pilot was going on and development of the home energy retrofit was being developed, another group pursued on-bill financing, which was a relatively new concept around the country, and one that was recommended by Schneider Electric. But a funny thing happened on the way to the forum with it, and that was we learned electric utilities in Michigan were not allowed to offer on-bill financing. Gas utilities could, and they have for years, and that's primarily for emergency furnace replacement. But electric utilities did not have that legal authority. So we started at square one by getting Joe Hoffman to introduce legislation to allow municipal utilities to offer on-bill financing. And it was a really pretty awesome process. You know, testifying before a House committee in Lansing was a unique career experience for several of us. And fortunately, it passed with overwhelming support and signed into law by Governor Snyder. So, you know, I'm really proud of Holland's perseverance for that. So then we started on the path of actually developing a program, and which took about 18 months. And after a research phase, we sat down with a group of community stakeholders and concurred on and came up with 3 goals. And coincidentally, these goals fit nicely with the triple bottom line that you know, we wanted to encourage deep energy savings. So a way that we do that is by allowing anything and everything in the Michigan Energy Measures database to be financed. Many other on-bill financing programs in the country have very limited low-hanging fruit type measures in them. So this process of sitting down, coming up with the goals, increasing equity, we wanted those that have access to financing, fine, you know, use that. We're trying to reach the people that might have a tarnished credit score, and but yet are good with paying their bills on time. That how can we get more people involved in doing home energy upgrades? And then to operate in a cost-effective manner. A lot of programs were started with a grant. And so once the grant ran out, then they were kind of stymied until more grant money was found or the initial money was paid back. So our program offers simple, convenient home improvement financing. The terms are quite attractive. By statute, we cannot charge more than 7% interest. We set it up so people can borrow from $5,000 up to $30,000, and pretty long term, you know, much more so than a typical, you know, personal loan someone would take out from a bank. And so having 15 years helps keep that monthly payment down. And there's no penalty for prepayment. So the loan is actually tied to the electric service. And so it's subject to all the same consequences of if you don't pay your electric service on time. So we can do shutoffs if the loan isn't paid. And actually research showed that the fewer defaults on loans that are tied to the electric service than traditional financing restrictions. So as I said, a wide array of what's covered, and it's simple to and pretty quick to qualify. The credit score is not used in qualifying someone. Their on-time bill payment history of 12 months is instead. They do pull a credit report because we do check for bankruptcy in the last 3 years or money judgments, that sort of thing. But pretty easy qualifying process. And getting this loan also requires the on-bill home energy assessment. So who's all involved in this is Holland Energy Fund as the custodian of the loan documents, and they're the ones that pay the contractor. Holland Board of Public Works does the bill payment history. We actually do the billing and the payment collections, and then we contract the loan servicing. Because that's not an expertise that staff had, and also loan servicing. We are looking at bringing loan servicing in-house, a loan module that would result in quicker, faster customer service and a little more control, less confusion for the customer if we bring that in-house, and we feel ready to do that now. So the results to date is that there have been 130 loans booked so far. And the amount that the projects total of those 130 loans is just over 2 million. And then the amount that's actually been financed, so you can see the difference. People are financing pretty much their whole project when they do that. And the average project cost is right about $18,000 that at the project size is, and they're financing on average $16,000. And what's neat to see is this truly is driving multiple measures and people taking that whole house approach, in that there's about 7 different measures, like insulation, maybe a new furnace, programmable thermostat, whatever, that the projects involve at least 7 measures. And then you can see in the chart our loan rates, and we've held those steady. Not trying to be the cheapest in town, but a good, nice fixed interest rate. And all of this work has brought some recognition in that for innovation, and it's actually brought much attention from the state and even around the country, including winning the governor's highest award, the Governor's Energy Excellence Awards in 2017. And it was the combination of Holland Energy Fund, Home Energy Retrofit Program, and the on-bill financing that Holland was recognized as the Innovator of the Year award by Governor Snyder. The Community Energy Plan also called for building labeling. I mentioned the home energy score. And so this is what is in the Community Energy Plan about that, suggesting that It would help fuel market-driven improvement. And the ones we've piloted, a couple of them, but not have we adopted these or operationalized them yet. So this could be a opportunity or a project to think about and recommend, is a building labeling system. The Department of Energy Home Energy Score is based primarily on a blower door test to measure air infiltration. Its downside is that old historic district homes with their high ceilings and the type of construction they have can never reach a 10. In fact, we had one that was a 1 going in and invested $30,000 and did all the right things, and they were retested and they still scored a 1. So we got kind of discouraged with the home energy score. And then a year or so ago, came across Pearl certification. And this is a different approach and has some promise to it. It's easier to implement because it doesn't require any testing. Rather, it's an inventory of the energy efficiency assets in your home. Like, is your thermostat programmable? How much insulation is in the attic? What is the efficiency level of your furnace, your air conditioning? And so it gives you a score based on this list or inventory of energy efficiency assets. It also includes turnkey materials for a realtor on how to market the energy efficiency features of a home on the market. So, that is another component. And then I'll end here with the energy waste reduction program. Just a quick overview of what's that has been about. In 2008, state law required all utilities, electric and gas, to set up efficiency programs and start using renewable energy if they hadn't already, have them in their portfolio. And this is referred to as a renewable portfolio standard, or an RPS. At the time that ours was started, there were 28 other states that had an RPS. And then it was called energy optimization, and electric utilities had to save 1% of retail electric sales, demonstrate that year over year. And SEMCO has a similar program. They, we have a 1%, theirs is a 0.75% annual efficiency gain. And their programs are very similar. In fact, on our rebate sheet, when we list our rebates that we offer, we, as a convenience to customers, print on the backside all the rebates that SEMCO offers. And the municipal, so this has been going on for 11, we're in our 12th year of offering these programs, and municipals are exempt after the end of this calendar year from reporting and filing to the Michigan Public Service Commission. However, we're still expected to have an energy waste reduction program. Investor-owned utilities are expected by 2025 to have 35% of their energy come from a combination of energy efficiency and renewables. So what we have in our residential program portfolio are programs to reach the income qualified or low income portion of our population. Efficient lighting has primarily been teaching people about the benefits of switching to LED lighting. Appliance recycling. We collect refrigerators, come to your home and take an old refrigerator away, give you $50 in return, and then have a rebate if you buy a new appliance. High efficiency equipment, promoting Energy Star equipment and high efficient furnaces, air conditioners. There's a new construction program. Multifamily. Now, Holland does not have much in the way of multifamily housing, but we do have programs that reach that. Education, we covered a lot of those in previous session. And pilot programs are ones like energy saving trees that we're doing in conjunction with the Arbor Day Foundation, where if you strategically plant a tree in your yard, it can help to save energy. And this chart shows an example of the results. And really, I put it up here so you can see sort of the ratio of, you know, what we're investing or spending each year. Now, there is a surcharge, energy optimization surcharge on people's bills that have been paying for this program through this year. And just in, you know, 1 year, we're operating at about $1.2 million budget to get the results that we do. And you'll also see that what we spend is in proportion to that portion of electric sales. So, you know, a much larger amount for C&I, you know, businesses than residential. However, it does cost more to put on the residential programs than it does the C&I. We're able to get the target energy savings for residential. It's running about 14 cents per kilowatt hour saved, and where C&I is 7 cents per kilowatt hour saved. And just over the years of the entire program, if you look at the bottom, you'll see this is the blended cost of the programs, and you know, this $12 million that has been invested over these years into the energy savings. And, you know, our blended average over the years is about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you look at just the last several years, that it is starting to increase again, how much it costs to get energy savings as we pick the low-hanging fruit off the vine. So, you know, people, you know, how many people are participating, you know, in preparation for our Go Forward program in 2022, and what we're proposing is that there will no longer be a surcharge for the energy waste reduction program. It'll be incorporated into the rates. But we did a survey of asking residents and businesses if you've participated in any of the services. And you know, most people on the residential side do look at their energy consumption through the BPW website, the portal, and they've used information and tips on saving energy. But surprisingly, only a third of residents say they've used the rebates. So, you know, this survey gives us some good information for moving forward on what needs to be promoted and, you know, what our penetration level is. And you'll probably see this chart again in 2 weeks when we talk about businesses. And then how many people have switched to LED light bulbs? Well, 84% of the residents said they had, and this whole study was done by Frost Institute, so we could get a good statistically correct survey. And then we also drilled down, well, what percentage of your light bulbs have been changed? So you can see that there is room for more distribution, education on the benefits of LED light bulbs. Okay, so going forward, the legislation mandate sunsets at the end of this calendar year. And we've put a plan in place for going forward and want to double down. And a lot of this is driven by the community energy plan, where we will ramp up to a 2% energy savings. So that's a quick overview of what's going on in the residential sector. And here's some questions that might spark, if you don't already have your own questions, but discussion questions about, knowing that there may be statutory or cost effectiveness limitations, what incentives are important to offer, what happens when incentives can only do so much. Do we try to encourage the state to allow cities more flexibility, like in building code requirements? Are mandates needed to get to scale if we want to get to 250 homes a year? What types of policies might there be? And is emphasis on the residential energy efficiency sufficient for now, given the size of the pie of our carbon footprint? We always ask and are looking for a fresh look at our programs, what might be needed. So we'll open it up and take your questions. I'll leave this up in case anybody wants me to go back to a particular slide. But Brian?
I was just going to say, thanks so much, Ann. This is a ton of really awesome stuff and good stuff for us to be chewing on. So I'll see, Jeff looks like he's ready to ask a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could you go back to the slide, the most recent year where you had the financials split out by one behind this one. So this kind of combines the residential and business. Can you, I guess, explain a little bit more in detail what I'm looking at for all of these columns? And
Okay.
And the revised goal, and then the kilowatt hours saved, how do those line up with total amounts and the 1% per year goal? And I guess, can you dive into this a little bit more?
Certainly. The allowance column is, we need to achieve a 1% of our retail electric sales in energy savings. So that becomes the kilowatt hour savings goal. So that's the fourth column over. And we are allowed to spend up to 2% of electric retail sales to get that 1% energy savings. So the column that reads allowance is what is 2% of our retail electric sales. Okay, so that's, I call it an allowance. It's not our budget, because what we actually spend to get to goal, you can see it was half of that. So then the kilowatt hour goal, the state was looking for us to save 11 million kilowatt hours. And the column that says revised goal is based on the fact that we've exceeded goal in previous years. And so we can bank those kilowatt hour savings. So our revised goal was the 7,400,000 that you see. What we actually saved was 10 million in that year. So we were 94% of that particular year's goal, but because of the banked savings from previous years, we exceeded goals. So what we reported to the state was something like 137% of goal. And then
that's the bank savings there because you saved 1.3% the year before. So then you carried the 0.3% over to the next.
Correct. So this next slide in the last column, you'll see what sort of our savings, actual savings were each year and what was leading to having savings banked, because you can carry over up to a third of any overage from the year before. It's getting into like Chicago math.
Yeah, there's, when they write a state law, they write it in a way that has a lot of stakeholder input. And so, to try to create, the right averaging tools and things like that to allow for ebb and flow in a particularly bad year or whatever. And again, not to say that the 2019 was a bad year, but there's these mechanisms in there to provide more of a smoothing arrangement on that, Jeff.
Well, and the investor-owned utilities can qualify for a bonus where they get money back and the municipal utilities don't. So yes, there are some ways so that they can handle the ebb and flow, and MPSC has incentives for the investor-owned utilities to reach goal. We do because it's the right thing to do. Any other questions?
Yes, I do. The previous slide that, well, I guess this is okay. No, the one that Jeff was asking about. So these are kilowatt hour goals mandated by the state.
Yes.
And so we're doing them. How do they fit into our goals or the CEP goals? Because we haven't set goals. And so, but I don't know what the goals, how these fit into the previous goals that were revisited a couple of years ago. So I don't know if I'm really happy with these or not very happy at the differences.
And I'll just add on that, Nikki. I think it's a really good question because people I know circulated like the Lansing Board of Power and White, like energy plan and goals, and how they had really aggressive goal. It like looked or read like they had more aggressive goals than we maybe did. And I know there was an article that was floating around in the email sphere over the last number of months. And I think, and I don't care, Ann or Dave, you guys can talk to it, but a lot of people don't understand like how the energy waste reduction goals that are mandated bleed into people's like named goals. And so I think it's a real, it might be its own little educational session, honestly. But Dave or Ann, if you would speak to Nikki's question, I think it's a really good one. Because
I think what this shows, and if you go to the next slide, Ann, I think, in particular, this shows a very solid track record over the last 12 years of meeting the state's mandates, right? And then exceeding the state's mandates really over that period of time. And so, this wasn't part of a stated goal within the community energy plan as far as a carbon reduction. What it was is a program that the state put pretty significant parameters on. It says, this is what you're going to do. You're going to meet these targets, and you're going to spend no more than this amount of money. In addition to that, we have to spend what we get in from the customers. So we can't like overspend money from the other rates. We also can't underspend and just continue to collect the money from these programs. So it's there's a pretty strict guideline on that. If you want to say if you're happy, you're sad about it, what I would say is look at the cost effectiveness of meeting these targets compared to other utilities that had the same targets to meet. And I would say you're going to be pretty happy about that, because our cost effectiveness in meeting the same targets has been pretty much at the top of the list throughout the state of Michigan in terms of that. So we've exceeded goal, and we've probably spent the least amount of money to do it, which is, I think, a good thing. What Ann showed on the slide after this in terms of where the program's going, keep going down to your design coming up now, Ann. Now that the mandates are gone after 2021, we have some flexibility, but the program still has to meet what's called a cost effectiveness test. We can't just take money and spend it on things that are not cost effective versus other ways of meeting the customer's needs for electricity. So energy waste reduction program design, and that's not something Ann got down into the weeds on, but in designing this program to go to 2%, the consultant that helped us put this together helped us analyze, what this program would cost compared to if we didn't have an energy waste reduction program, but still were constrained on our carbon, for example, as a utility. What's the best way of getting there? And this program, by the consultant's design, is shown to be cost effective, meaning that the customers ultimately will pay less for supporting an energy waste reduction program than they would for not having it in place. So, I guess, another way to say that is that we have some more flexibility now that the state is not doing their program, and we can decide on where we're going. And this 2% number that's out there, I think, is the highest municipal target that's out there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it also is as high or higher in terms of the time frame than the investor-owned utilities in terms of that. So, so I guess that's another way to judge it, if you were to put some sort of parameter around that, Nikki.
Yeah, and Nikki, as it relates to the community energy plan, the way the impact of this is measured by the every other year carbon footprint calculation we've been doing. And that if people are using less energy, it's going to show up in the carbon footprint reduction. And as we started out in this presentation, you saw the progress that's been made in reducing the residential energy consumption or the carbon footprint.
And a lot of people use the rebates that didn't do deep home energy retrofits, but not a lot of people that, how was I going to say this? People use the rebates that did home energy retrofits, but there's a lot fewer people that did home energy retrofits. And so the idea here is that this energy waste reduction program was a nice supplement to those that did under the community plan pursue a deep home energy retrofit. And just like Semco's program, if you look at that 20% rebate or 10% rebate that Ann talked about in the home energy retrofit program, that program's rebate. These other energy waste reduction improvements were rebates over top of that helped that program be more successful even, or help the financing for those programs in addition to that 10 or 20% rebate under the home energy retrofit program.
So it's part of the whole package of
it is
building.
It is. And remember that, what Ann, I don't know if it came through clear enough, the idea behind home energy retrofit program being deep is because the community plan identified like a 53% savings in the first tier of buildings and 66% later on. those are deep energy retrofits. If you address just the energy measures that are in our energy waste reduction program and in SEMCO's energy waste reduction program, you probably will not get the depth of that. And once you get the low-hanging fruit taken out, I think what we're seeing even is it gets much more challenging. And that's why it goes back to those questions about incentives. Incentives only get so far. There will be a point at where you'll reach the end of the low-hanging fruit. You'll be saturated out on incentive programs. And I think that day hasn't gotten here yet. And we're encouraged that we can create a 2% type of program, at least in the short run. But there will be a point in time where we'll start to become challenged to cost effectively continue to operate a program that'll have energy waste reduction associated with it. And that gets to the questions as to at what point do things like mandates start to become part of the picture? And should it and can it? Are there statutory limitations today even on some of those things? But if we do have them, what are those type of policies that should be considered?
Well, and as we go back to the energy retrofit, I know we mentioned in our Holland, in the Holland Energy Fund meeting, and it has been mentioned before, our goal, we say our baseline, one must spend $10,000 first. And why is that so high? Is that a barrier to participation in the program? A perceived barrier, because there are lots of different mechanisms to achieve that goal. But there are, 25% of people, low income people, who won't be able to do that. And so I like and the last slide too, along with the question about the mandates, let's take a fresh look at some of these programs. I like the home retrofit program, but it does warrant a fresh look if it's going to continue to be effective. As Ann said, there are not as many homes being retrofitted as we'd want. COVID is a big reason this last year, no doubt. That's a kind of a asterisk. But we should take a fresh look. We want this to happen.
I want to add one more awareness piece to that statement, though, is that there are almost no homes being retrofitted to a 53% level.
Which?
Explain that, Dave.
Yeah.
So again, the community energy plan identified a deep energy retrofit of our housing stock, getting to 53% in that first segment of homes over the first 20 or so years of the program. And then the second 20 years of the community energy plan would be a deeper of more modern homes, getting to 66% sort of level of efficiency gain once the building codes are adjusted and things like that too. What I'm saying is that even at a 10% or $10,000 level for getting the rebate, the type of savings that we're seeing on these homes is closer to 30% maybe type of savings. It's not the depth that the community plan called for. So not only is there an issue in terms of the amount of homes, but the homes that are being retrofitted aren't being retrofitted anywhere near the level that the community plan anticipated they were.
And is that because it's too expensive, or because that's one of the reasons why the Pearl program came about?
Right. I mean, if you look at again, there's low hanging fruit, and I think a lot of homeowners would stop at wherever it's going to pay back from an energy savings immediately versus the amount of money it takes to put into the program. I mean, currently the amount of the loan is about 7 times the amount of the energy savings from a dollar perspective. And so going deeper will only hurt that. And so I think people are getting to the level where they get the rebate, but they're not getting to the level that's associated with the goal within the community energy plan.
And that, just to be clear, Dave, that goal, that was out of a Schneider study, right?
No, that was out of the Garforth report that was right out of the bat, Brian.
Got it. So that was just frankly, that was just a shot in the dark, more or less.
Okay.
I mean, Garforth maybe wouldn't admit to that, but that's what I'm saying. And I'll take a hit on public television here.
Well, I'm just saying that there's a lot of scrutiny as to we're not hitting this as a community. We need to do more. We're not doing this. And then, you know, if the goal wasn't right to begin with, and let's acknowledge that, I guess, up front, if that was a shot in the dark, maybe we need to acknowledge that part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It was right to ask about fresh eyes.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
absolutely.
it's not fair to say. I mean, if it is fair, fine. If it's not, but we haven't determined that.
Yeah.
Dave, I'm going to set you up here too, because I think it fits in. You know, when we talk about some of these programs too, and Dave nicely kind of unveiled it a little bit. When you take a look at the return on the investment of this, and when you take a look at what was the percentage earlier, where we're looking at the homeowners are investing 87% of the investment.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to figure out how to incentivize that. But then you take a look at, okay, the money that's put into it, you know, I like it from one of those side effects is it increases property values, which is good for the resident and it's good for the city. But if you take a look at the connection to how much the money spent is actually driving the metric of lowering the carbon footprint.
Yeah. Well, Becky can.
I know one of the things that we've looked at is like dollar invested versus.
Yeah, and I can get you something real quick on that, Keith. If Ann, if you can stop sharing a minute, if I can share.
Quick sharing.
And you know, this is the again, this is the chart from the current so everything here this is the current tab. So this shows the all the different things that we're working on and the different levers, right? And the home energy retrofit is over here under this line 10. So if I just highlight that, you can see that the incremental cost really kind of represents that community investment, you know, at 100 homes a year, and the value of the average rebate is around $1,867. So that's the community spend. That's the rebate dollars that are going into it. The greenhouse gas reduction, when you look at the actual savings of the factors of the kilowatt hours and the gas, it's about 222 tons. So the average per ton is about $840 per ton, which compared to a lot of other things out here on the list, you know, is one of the higher things that we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I mean, to incentivize more of it means more community dollars going into it, or maybe better marketing. But I think, again, the West Michigan Glass Block has essentially doubled their investment in marketing there. It's a challenge. And I think, you know, there's going to be, this is an area where motivation is, you know, I think going to be a challenge at that level to figure out how to really drive more adoption and deep adoption, especially when we're talking about projects that have a value of $15,000 to $20,000 per home. Yeah, it's a very significant investment for a homeowner.
It definitely is. Well, and that's where we have to set our goals of how maybe we were the original goal, so many homes, was too ambitious, or maybe, you know, whatever it was. I think we're revising our goals, and that's part of the fresh look.
Yeah.
Our overall goals and these individual goals on the different levers.
Hey,
that'll be important.
Just a quick point here. I have a hard stop in 3 minutes, and Trav can go another 10 after that, and then he's got a hard stop. So just FYI.
Yeah, I think we wanted to give you a lot to chew on this time. Obviously, we're going to come back to this on the 29th and spend a little bit of time there. I'm sorry?
Yeah, we always put out the PowerPoint presentations when we're complete. So yes, you will get a copy.
Yeah, I think the only other thing on the agenda real quick then, Brian, is any update from Joe real quick, if he's still on.
Yeah, unless there's something else burning that we won't pick back up in 2 weeks, when we will definitely pick this back up, then yeah, Joe, why don't you jump in here?
Yep, still here. I can keep it super short this week and we can look to next week if there's time then. Only updates would be you hopefully had a chance to look at that document I shared last week. I will keep doing the research as we look at those focus cities. Again, those were Grand Rapids, Lansing, Dubuque, Iowa, and Eau Claire, Wisconsin. If there's any major objections or questions, please let me know before we go too far ahead. But otherwise, we can look to 2 weeks from now to talk more about those.
Good.
I think that's it.
Wonderful.
And okay.
So will we do in commercial or industrial energy or building?
Yeah, that is next after residential, but we have to finish the residential conversation, which I mean, considering how much time transportation took, I would imagine residential will also take time. And then are we going to break commercial industrial into two, Dave?
We can. I know that we can. I know that we've got again a speaker from Steelcase coming in to talk about perspective of industry.
Okay.
And I think that'll be one we definitely want to hit on the 29th. She is set up for that date.
Is that Maeve?
Huh?
Are you having? Is it Maeve?
No, Mary Ellen.
Oh, you're having Mary Ellen.
Yep.
Oh, got it. Great.
Yeah, I think Nikki, you asked the question, Brian asked the question. I think now we're moving into a section where there are going to be multiple meetings to review education where we've kind of been in a rotation. So we're probably going to be in some of these sections and we'll work on putting agendas together, for example, where we make sure we preserve time for Joe to do the update and review that he did. So we might have to just put in some hard stops and say, all right, like we'll have to pick this up next time because we need to get to other things. Because as you can tell, we're not getting through all of the items on our agenda every meeting.
Yeah.
And we kind of had it, we deviated. I mean, we were doing a study and then we were dedicating kind of a full session to the debrief. Now we're trying to kind of roll into the next one to keep it moving. So, I mean, I think that's part of why that is, but I mean, we'll just keep pushing and try to get through it all.
Yeah, I think doing a good solid debrief on residential and then hearing from Mary Ellen is a nice teaser into the industrial. And then there's going to be, I mean, we need to hear what, the same thing from Ann or whoever that we heard about residential. We need to hear that. And then there's plenty of other stuff on that regard, considering it's the biggest piece of the pie, like Tim said earlier. So
yeah, the other topics are, we've got an energy waste reduction, which you saw some of it right now. We've got recommendations that came out of the commercial and institutional task force that I think you heard a little bit about real early in the process. And then the last thing that we've got there is probably a discussion about PACE financing. And because like on bill financing, that's a mechanism that can be utilized to help businesses deal with the capital needs associated with these investments. So those four kind of topics within that C&I area that we can probably break up if we need to do that into a couple sessions.
Yeah. Yep. All right. That's good. Well, I think then we got a good game plan for next time. And I think April, we still have, are we just going to deal with April on March 29th? Or do we want to talk about holding a date right now? It's going to be after the spring break, right?
April 12th.
19th?
April 12th.
I think it's
Don't you
April.
have a BPW meeting?
Yeah, hang on a second.
Yeah, I was
April
gonna
12th
say-
is the BPW meeting. Yeah, April 19th is the
Even I know
date.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, April 5 we're skipping.
Yep.
And then we're moving into April 19th. So it'll be a little bit of a gap there, but
Yeah, Keith's got his big Bora Bora spring break.
Yeah, seriously. We want pictures.
Yeah.
I won't think of you.
What do they pay those city managers? Holy cow. Oh, that's on the record. So good.
Whoopsie.
No.
All right.
Yeah, so we're looking at April, so the 29th, April 19, and then in May, we'll try to get back on our regular.
April 19th or April 12th?
19th. You have a
19th.
PCW meeting on the 12th.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. Yes. So plan on the 19th and we'll be in touch if anything changes, 29th, 19th and beyond.
And then we'll do every Monday in May.
Every Monday.
No, because
Every day that ends in
And wooden
Y.
shoes.
we have BPW meetings on the opposite, so.
Yeah.
Can we meet every day at tulip time at the Civic Center?
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea.
Not unless you want to drive Dave and I in early graves.
I don't want to do that,
Which
Keith.
maybe you do want to do.
I don't want to do that. You know that. I want you to go to Bora Bora. All right.
All right. Adios. See you in a while.
I'm
Thank you.
3 minutes past my hard stop. So,
Okay.
Thanks again, Ann.
all right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.
Peace.